thank you for coming. This is the Washington County Heritage Center for the Washington County Historical Society. I'm Brent Peterson. I'm the executive director. The manager of the center is Emily Krasowski. Like
close enough.
And we welcome all of you. We have programs and events almost every week. So thank you for coming. These programs are free, of course, but there is a donation box. But I received the honor of introducing our speaker tonight. Our speaker is a Washington County Historical Society board member. Actually, he's an important board member. He is the treasurer. So he has a lot to do with the money, and that's why he wanted me to make sure I pointed out the donation box. But Tom Simonet has been a generational family here in the St. Croix Valley. He's worked with Wells Fargo. He is from the Air Force as well. I won't talk about it. I had a few jokes about Tom Cruise, but he looks an awful lot like Tom Cruise. But we're here to learn about this important occupation in the St. Croix Valley back in the 1800s, 1900s, and 2000s, right, Steve? And I'm not going to take up too much time because we all want to hear Mr. Simonet. So Tom, take the podium. Thank you.
I really need to thank him.
Thomas.
Yes, Karen. Yes. Okay, we're going to start off with one thing that I got to make a disclaimer, multiple disclaimers. I came out of a family of 9, I was number 7. And the line was always, when you are older, we will tell you. So, Pat, am I old enough now to know about these kind of things? She says I'm not old enough, so that's it for the program, we're done.
When you're older, I'll tell you more.
You tell me more? I'm afraid okay, yes. A few years ago, I created a spreadsheet looking at this book, and I'll bring my microphone with me. Looking at this book here, and it's the arrest records for the Stillwater police going from roughly 1880 to 1884. And this name kept on appearing, well, actually 2 names kept on appearing time and time and time again. Michael Keogh and Ellie Mandeville. Now, when you read what was listed for Ellie, she was always arrested by Matt Shortell. She always paid one of the largest fines in the city. You know, when you take a look down here, this one was charged $10, $7.50, $5, you know, for things like drunkenness, disorderly conduct. Nell and Mike Keogh always paid somewhere around $75 to $110 a month. So, yeah, it did, and it caught my eye. So I make this spreadsheet and I show it to Brent. Now Brent thinks I'm an expert on Red Nell. So when this comes up, he says, hey, Tom, why don't you talk about Red Nell? I also need to thank and give acknowledgement to a bunch of local newspapers. The Minnesota Historical Society, Don Boxmeyer's article in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, Jim Dunn's multiple books on our local history, and Carol Mankey's article in the St. Croix Free Press, along with the archives, which hold treasures like the Stillwater arrest records of the 1800s. You know, without that, we can't go back and take a look at what's happened back in those time periods. And also a disclaimer, I want to make sure it's and how Don Boxmeyer wrote it. And it was about Nina Clifford. Nina Clifford was considered in St. Paul in the 1920s, the 3rd most prominent citizen. She was behind James Hill and Archbishop Ireland. Now, I will let you use your own imagination what Nina Clifford had on Washington Street, which had a tunnel over to the men's club across the way. I'm here just to lay out the information and let you make your own judgments. We do know that Red Nell never had, or we cannot find any photographs of Red Nell. It would be nice to know, what she looked like, but we don't have a clue. We don't know what the color of her lifestyle was. We don't know how or why she chose this profession of being a madam. I read a book recently, and for those people that want to get an insight of what life was like back in that time period. So it's called The Dangerous Business by Jane Smiley. If you ever get a chance to read a book, it really, even though this is done in Monterey, California, you start seeing the streets of Stillwater in her writings. And so that's what then started making myself look at these articles that were written about Nell to determine what was happening at that time. So here's what we do know about Nell, or in the case of her birth name, Ellie Glenn. She was born in 1848. Now, how many people remember about 1848? Now, I'm going to diverse for just a second. In 1848, there was the state of Minnesota, or excuse me, there was a committee that formed in downtown Stillwater. 1848 was also the year that Wisconsin became a state, right? Now, what ended up happening is Wisconsin decided to follow the St. Croix River and the Mississippi River for their western boundary, which then left a portion of Wisconsin territory from the St. Croix Mississippi River over to the other end of the Mississippi River, or basically that triangle land. So no longer is Madison the capital of Wisconsin territory. So Stillwater kind of becomes the capital of Stillwater, or becomes the capital of a Wisconsin territory. So my question to all of you is, what would have happened if those people did not come to Minnesota to do the convention of 1848 to go and petition Congress to allow that area between that Mississippi River and the St. Croix to become the state of Minnesota?
We'd be cheeseheads.
We'd be cheeseheads. We would be Packer fans. Ellen also had a brother who was 3 years old in the 1850 census. And her mother, Mary Glenn, was the only other person listed in those census at that time. There is no husband, but what ends up happening, you fast forward to 1857 and you see a John Glenn listed and a Mary Glenn, husband and wife. And you see Daniel still as these, now this 9-year-old son. Ellen is now a 7-year-old. And there are 2 additional children, John and Mary A. Glenn at 6 months. Daniel and Ellen are born in Ohio. John and Mary Jr., yes, are born in Minnesota. We can only speculate that during that time period, John is looking for work. He is bouncing between Ohio and Minnesota trying to find employment because he does not have a job listed in the census. And then the family does finally settle in Minnesota because the next census record in 1850 or 1865 shows the family still all together as a single unit. When we come to the 1870 census, we show that Ellen Glenn is age 22. She is listed as a prostitute living in Stillwater Township. She's living with a gentleman by the name of, I gotta look for my note, there it is, Michael Fortain. Now, I'll tell you his name because you're gonna hear that name come again a little bit later. Living in that same house is a housekeeper and another young lady who is also listed as a prostitute. In the 1875 census, Ellie is now listed as Nellie, and she is married to Lawrence Mandeville. And the spelling of Mandeville, as you go through the records, bounces a lot. Sometimes it's Mandeville, sometimes it's Mandeville, sometimes it's Mandeville. So we're staying with Mandeville. Many accounts show up about Nellie in the Stillwater Messenger, Stillwater Daily Sun, Stillwater Democrat, Stillwater Gazette, the St. Paul Globe. They all like her stuff. And the first one that I was found was in May 10th of 1878. And it goes, a row occurred Wednesday night at what is known as Red Nell's Sinkhole of Sin, in which a hack driver who recently came to this city drew a shooting iron on a husky lumberman, but quickly repenting, flew up the stairs and escaped from the window just in time to avoid serious trouble. The number of hack drivers in Stillwater has been diminished by one. Now, a row is a fight or quarrel, and a hack driver is a livery driver, or what we now know today as a cab driver. I kind of wonder what the hack driver was thinking as he's running up the stairs, going, this is not a good idea that I got upset with this lumberman. And then running for his life and probably never showed his face back up in the city of Stillwater. The next article shows up in the St. Paul Globe on April 7th, 1879. And it shows the paper pointing their finger at this virtuous establishment and then quickly 4 days later saying, oops, we were wrong. A livery horse and buggy driven by Mary Bruce, Nell Jackson, and Florence Dibble, 3 inmates of Red Nell's Banjo, ran away across the lake Saturday. The lake is the river down here, just so you get your reference. The horse ran down on the logs on the Wisconsin side. You know, Wisconsin, sin, remember? Smashing the buggy into pieces and spilling out the occupants. The horse escaped without serious injury. We understand that Mary Brace received internal injuries. Nell Jackson was badly cut over the eyes, and Florence Dibble received a gash on her forehead. All got minor bruises, and they say too free of indulgence is the errand of the cause of it. Too free of indulgence. I wonder if liquor was involved. I'm not sure. Well, the St. Paul Globe had to publish a retraction. So you see, back even in 1879, the papers made very terrible mistakes. Shame on them. The virtuous inmates of Red Nell Banjo are justly indignant at the article in Monday's Globe stating that the 3 prostitutes injured Saturday evening dwelt in the highly respectable atmosphere. Through a medium of a frequenter of the place, they informed us yesterday, the parties referred to in Monday's paper own allegiance to William Fontaine. Remember Fontaine? William Fontaine, Michael Fontaine? Now they had a business on the other side of the river. Something, kind of a similar establishment. And so the paper continues. We gladly make the correction, as we would not normally publish anything reflect this credibility on the highly moral and virtuous inmates of Miss Nell's respectable residence, we can only plead ignorance in the extension of our offense. I'm sure glad that the St. Paul Globe felt, that they needed to publish that, because do you think the St. Paul Globe was really offering a serious apology? The next article in the Globe is on July 7th and shows Red Nell's ill-famed house as a place of safety. Think this through. This is where this book, A Dangerous Business, really sheds some light to me. Where do women go when all of a sudden they're, today we have the women's shelter if they're ever being in an abusive relationship. But back then, we didn't have that type of establishment to allow a woman to be protected. Where would they go? They would go where other women would protect them. Sweet Ann and her partner, Mike Blake, raised particularly Hail Colombian, or as I brought up the dictionary, a severe beating, punishment, or scolding. Saturday night, she having decided to leave her lord and master, so-called, took her worldly possessions to a place in town. Hence, he removed them to another hiding place. A demand was made upon the police by the woman for the recovery of what she claimed as her own individual property. The officers of the law secured the property and returned it to her when she went out to the house in Holcomb's Addition to remain for the night. She was followed by Mike and his pals and was forcibly abducted from the retreat. A messenger came into the city with the news that several roughs were making a terrible disturbance in which a woman was also connected. The officers immediately started in pursuit and found a woman at Red Nell's. She maintained that nothing was wrong, that she was acting according to her own free will, that no force had been used against her, and she would not make any complaint and wished no disturbance created. The officer left the matter and it now rests temporarily. Now I got to give some concept or a visual of where are we in Stillwater. Red Nell's establishment was always referred to out west of town. It was on the other side of the city limits. It wasn't in the cities. And on this big Stillwater map over there, and Brent's going to point to it, that quarter section of property, 40 acres of land, is where Larry Mandeville and Nell had their homestead. Now, if you kind of know that Myrtle Street runs out that way, that is the location of the JC ballparks. I now have another question. What was there before the ballparks? Stillwater Dump. Continuing on articles from other local papers, and this one from the Stillwater Messenger on August 16th, lists the dangers of having valuables in your home. Another name to remember of what we use here, the House of Shame, kept by Red Nell and Larry Mandeville, was the scene of a successful but not a very profitable robbery about 1 o'clock Thursday morning. 7 masked men entered the house after the inmates had retired and with drawn revolvers compelled Larry and Nell to cover their faces with a quilt and surrender the keys to the latter's trunk, where they expected to find over $1,600. They were able to only discover $75, which they took, together with that pistol, but they overlooked a gold watch that was wrapped in a handkerchief. was sleeping upstairs. It's always nice to have your name listed in the paper, sleeping upstairs at Red Nell. He had $650 on his person, and hearing the racket that was, he armed himself and stood at the head of the stairs, ready to drop the first man who should attempt to ascend. But the robbers didn't molest him and made their escape without difficulty. No arrests or clues as to the perpetrators. Yes, imagine that. The next article ties directly to the listing of Red Nell dealings with the city of Stillwater and keeping her house of ill fame. The house west of this city, known as the Highboard House. The Highboard House is Mike Keogh. Mike Keogh and Red Nell have competing businesses side by side. And they're both out in the area west of town. There's been several complaints made by parties living on the road that they were disturbed by parties who frequent these places, and that they were notified about a week ago that they must close up and get out of the city limits, but they failed to. And Saturday night, the police bounced the cribs. Interesting words. The next one is from the St. Paul Daily Sun. A variety of birds known as doves, and which are popularly supposed to have their plumage ruffled and soiled, contribute to the city this morning as follows. Nellie, Mandeville, $79, and Haiti Day, $68. Nothing else was reported in the municipal court. Nice to know, get good records. The city treasury, and being the treasurer of the department, I do like the flow of money in, not money out. So, money coming in always is good. The city treasurer profited much by the business transactions at the municipal court today. Mike Keogh pleaded guilty to keeping a house of ill fame and paid an assessment of $100.50. Nellie Mandeville, like offense, paid $76. Peter Kane was for fast driving on the bridge. Fast driving on the bridge? And a horse and buggy? The bridge was wood. But he was fined $5 and committed to 8 days in jail. A couple of plain drunks closed the proceedings for the morning. And then in the St. Paul Globe again, a raid is proposed to be made on Red Nell's in the high board fence now that the Wisconsin authorities have raided those dens across the river. So it's nice that what happens on one side of the river, they do make sure that it happens on the other. When I went and read these different articles, I went again back to the Webster Dictionary. Do you know that there's 118 different words used to describe a lady of the evening? On Wednesday night, the demi-mode, who resides at Red Nell's and Mike Keogh's high board fence, had a stop put on their business and the police taking possession of their establishment. The girls took it in good part and were glad that they were not taken to the city hall. The houses across the lake were in full blast, and there were several fights during the night on the other side of the river, not here in Stillwater because, coming up to the last couple ones here. This is why, the title of the book, The Dangerous Business, is so true. A row occurred this afternoon at the house of one of Nellie Mandeville, a spoiled dove. The lady was struck a somewhat severe blow on the face. The bludgeon was arrested by Officer Waters. So being that was listed in June 4th, 1882 in the paper, I went, did they truly arrest a person And so I went to the book, and I went, to June 4th, 1882, and yeah, they did. They found the guy, and if I can get to it in reasonable amount of time, it was for abusive behavior, gauge to officer, and selling liquor, and assault and battery. He was fined, but he was incarcerated for 13 days. So, yeah, it's a dangerous business. A chap named McClissick was arrested at the high board fence yesterday morning for choking one of the girls there and assaulting the girl at Red Nell's. Now, being that stops in 1884, this article is written in 1886. So I wasn't able to find out, did they ever arrest the individual? Yesterday, Judge Nethaway fined Mike Keogh and Nellie Mandeville each $75 for the cost of keeping houses of ill fame. Another individual was taxed $7 and for drunkenness. Another one for $5 for drunkenness. Another one, $7 for drunkenness and disorderly conduct. And the judge then tried 70 city cases and 13 state cases during the month of June or May of 1886. In 1888, on July 23rd, Red Nell passes away. Nell Mandeville, most commonly known as Red Nell, a woman who has kept a house of ill repute for years, died at 12 o'clock this morning of cholera. She was taken suddenly ill this morning and continued to grow worse until she relieved by her death. The deceased was 39 years old and leaves a mother and daughter who live in St. Paul. The remains were taken to St. Paul overland tomorrow, where a funeral will take place. And another Stillwater Democrat, Nellie Mandeville, formerly called Red Nell, died at 1 o'clock a.m. from cholera after 24 hours of illness. The case is said by the attendant physician to have been closely allied to cholera, and no help could be rendered the unfortunate victim from the start. She had been a resident here for over 20 years, and aside from her famous business, had a kindly heart and was generous and sympathetic. Her remains were taken overland to St. Paul, where her mother resides, for interment. When I read that obituary, we can quickly pass judgment on people when we see, oh, they were a prostitute or they held the house of ill fame. But we don't remember that what they did. And we don't think about the kindness that comes out, the sympathetic heart that is there. And I was glad to see that written even in this paper back in the 1880s. Red Nell's husband passes a few years later, and it's the death of Larry Mandeville. Larry Mandeville, age 56, died this forenoon at the city hospital where he has been for the past week and treated for meningitis. The remains are in the charge of Wig and Simonet. I did not have anything to do with that at the time. And will probably be buried at the expense of the county. A married daughter of the deceased lives in St. Paul. And remember about retractions? Even the Stillwater Gazette, the noble paper of the city. The late Larry Mandeville will not be buried at the expense of the county, as he has ample means for such purpose. He owns 40 acres, and Brent pointed the 40 acres out, of land of which he received an hefty income of $600 a year. Now, Larry also lived, being a colorful life. And there's rumor there, and again, nothing can be proved because documentation really doesn't truly exist except good myth and speculation. That he owned a boat called the Blue Goose. Now the Blue Goose sailed up and down the river and it picked up passengers and dropped them off at locations, along the river. So if you want to add 2 and 2 together, you can come up with your own assumption of what that Blue Goose was there for. And I got a feeling it will, they had great customers. The last article about the paper or about the house is written in 1912. We are told that a prize cockfight was held at Red Nell's old house of ill fame on the outskirts of the city of Stillwater. That lasted until 5 o'clock on Sunday morning. Steel spurs were used and some 30 of the roosters were killed in the fight. Men from Omaha, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Stillwater were participants in the betting their money on the outcome of a fight between two poor birds. It is said that a large amount of money was made and lost by the 200 sports present. Sports of this kind, no doubt, is fascinating to certain natures, but it is far from being elevating, and we would advise that those who indulge in it to observe the law and make such exhibition a serious offense. Stillwater Messenger in 1912. So with that, Red Nell was a nice lady. Yeah, she ran a business that catered and, but we don't know the reasons why she went down that road. But we have to then at least know that there is a history within this city of that has taken place, and not honor it, but at least acknowledge it. So are there any questions? Oh, please.
I have a question.
He had his hand up first, but he's my brother, so no. Yes, young lady.
Where in Ohio was she born? Do you know?
No, it just says Ohio. I did try to go out to the census to look for Glenn and the Ohio census, and nothing came up. Oh, good. Yes.
I didn't even see this person come in.
Oh,
that's where I'm from.
Reason why you asked if it was Grant? Oh, okay.
I'll check around.
All right, Brother Bob.
Okay, well, one thing is a comment that when you listed off those associates of Red Nell, you come up with an awful lot of Irish surnames. And
what's your point?
Back, well, Glenn is an Irish name.
It's also relative.
Yes, we do have some kinfolk.
Yeah.
But during the mid-1800s, the Irish were looked down upon.
Yeah.
Remember, this is a time when signs appeared and establishments where they're looking for workers. No Irish need apply. All right, so a woman who is less regard than a man would have no options if they found themselves in a position where they had to fend for themselves. Okay, that aside, again, I must confess that I do watch historical presentations or on the internet, and every once in a while they cater it into the various forms of life, and they talk about the in towns as they were developing on the frontier in 1850, Stillwater was really on the edge of the frontier.
Yes.
That there were two places with readily available cash, banks and bordellos. And they had money. And there was noticed that one of the sources for loaning money for civic developments was the bank or the other source of readily available money. And at least out west, they had occasion to look upon houses of ill repute to fund certain civic projects up to and including building churches.
Thanks, Bob.
Don't be here.
Ireland and helped build the big church, the cathedral that was there, that Nina was a contributor to his.
I didn't go into it to find out, but I.
Nina helped the bishop.
Yes.
Well, you were reading the arrest warrants, so I'm wondering, the first one starts while Minnesota is still a territory. So who set those amounts other than somebody who needed to fund
The judge.
police?
Yeah, the judge will set the fund.
They didn't have a judge at that time because they weren't state yet.
Oh no, they will have a judge. Yeah, but you know, by the time I'm reading these articles are taking place in 1881. Minnesota has been a state now. I do my math quickly. 22 years.
I think the first one was when Wisconsin still wasn't even.
No, that was just when she was born. That was the census. You know, when the first offense takes place in 1881, and I may have said 1848 or something like that. I could have messed up. Yes, sir. Not you, Brent. Yes, sir.
Say yes.
I'm not, you know, I cannot confirm nor deny. And the reason I see that is when I go through the police records of the 1800s, I don't see anybody else being arrested for a house of ill fame during that time period. Were there other houses? There might have been. There is a lot of speculations of houses that, you know, as you drive through Stillwater, I've always heard, oh, that house on the corner of, and I won't name the streets, was one. Or that house that's down there on Stagecoach Trail, that could have been one. And I could only go with the record that is showing that Mike Keogh and Nell Mandeville are arrested consistently, monthly, I might add. Yes.
Well, you've got a great book there up to 1884. What about something after that? No books?
Oh, Brent's starting this in. Yes, there are, you know, Brent has a huge collection that is going to be stored just on the other side of this wall.
Donation boxes, excuse me.
Slowly but surely, we're going to be moving the stuff out of the carriage house and bringing it up here so that it's a lot more easy access. But I only looked at this book, and then Brent says, hey, Tom, you're going to do a presentation.
Since you have an interest in this subject, there's an interesting book on the history of this profession in the Old West called Soiled Doves.
Okay.
And, it's a good one to read. I think there's a lot of background. It's whole thing, how they relate to the politicians, the law enforcement people.
Politicians have anything to do with that? Why would no? I have that hard to believe. Yes, sir.
Did they actually list Nell's profession in the census?
Yes.
The prostitute.
Well, that just, you know, because, you know, we do have. This is the 1870s. And here's the line right here. And then here's the profession. And what does it say? Okay.
Was she ever really arrested for prostitution, or was it for alcohol? Or?
No, she was arrested for keeping a house of ill fame. Or she was also arrested for being, you know, and I promised my daughter I wouldn't say nasty words, but a whore.
It's a perfectly good word.
It is?
Yes,
My sister said it's a good word, I can use it. I'm old enough.
He's old
now.
enough.
I heard that an additional benefit of the Blue Goose operating on the river was that the borderline goes right down the middle of the St. Croix, so they can escape various laws. You know, they can just drift over to the other side.
Isn't that amazing on how, you know, state lines will always help us? Yes, I wouldn't doubt that one bit, that they use that tactic to avoid being captured. Yes, Brent.
Talk about Red Nell. How did she get that money?
How did Red Nell get her moniker?
Moniker.
Moniker.
Red hair,
Yes.
red dress.
Oh God, did she have red hair? At least that's what it said. You know, colored hair in her arrest records also say red, red, red.
Well, wasn't she just set up for the wealthier people in the city? Because the ones that I heard about from Grandpa LaFleur in the 1800s, there was a lot of nickel and dime ladies working downtown Stillwater
And there are, there are every so often a prostitute will show up as being charged, and then also on the other side of the page, escorted out of town.
Oh.
But that goes back to the comment of, are there any other houses of ill repute in Stillwater at the time?
Yes.
Most likely, but you know, we just know about Nell and Keogh, Mike Keogh. Yeah. Yes, Angie.
So I had my hands on those as well. My family in the 1880s, lumberjack family in Canada. And whenever they would talk about Red Nell or anything like that, oh, the lumberjacks. I'm like, no. My grandfather that I descended from, he helped build the Episcopal Church. He was an upstanding citizen, a lot. So I went through that and wrote a paper on it. And it was a small percentage of those that went to the establishment that were lumberjacks. There was other,
other individuals, yes. And I want to, you know, that's one of the things I was going to bring up, and it also goes ties with Brent's family, because Brent's family's out of the Scandia area. The lumberjacks would leave in the fall to go and start cutting the trees down in the winter. And then in the spring, they would float the logs down and they would come back to be home. A lot of them were farmers. So they had that time period where, well, they couldn't grow, you know, crops. So they worked in the field. And so a lot of them came back to their homes to be with their families, to work their homestead. And then that was, that was how they kept the income coming in for the family by rotating. So lumberjacks have gotten a bad name as being the cruel and inconsiderate individuals who lived in these houses of ill repute. And really, no, they may have gone there once or twice, or some of them did. No doubt that they did. A 21-year-old kid coming out of the forest with his lot of money, left to his own devices. Yeah, I can see somebody like that going to there, but not the majority of them. Not like we paint the picture today. So.
Thank you for showing her as a real person, as not just a caricature of like quite often in these kind of
as you say, nefarious occupations, you don't see a real person there. You
No.
showed us a real person.
She was, yes, and I'll go back to that book. You got to read that book, Dangerous Business, because before, you know, I saw the spreadsheet first, and yeah, I saw a person there, but that book really does help lay out what these ladies go through in such a dangerous business.
Any other questions?
All right.
What's the other book you have?
The other book, it was James done.
Does he say anything about this business?
Well, just a minute here. Yes, he does. And you know, I will not throw James Dunn under the bridge on this one, but there has to be a correction made. Two houses of ill fame across the lake in what is often called St. Petersburg, but which has since taken the name of Holton, especially drew the newspaper's attention. These sinkholes of sin, the Democrats said, were operated by Red Nell and Harry Mandeville, Perry the Pimp, and Mac 14. 14 comes back again. Now, we know that Red Nell's house was west of Stillwater, not across the lake. So, you know, that's why I say, you know, I don't want to throw Jim Dunn under the, that he wasn't truly correct on that statement, but.
Couldn't she have had more than one?
Maybe she.
Well, there was one, there were others over on, I'm only talking about the Stillwater ones.
What happened to Keogh?
I was just looking at that today. Mike Keogh lived to be quite old. He died in 1921, and he would ride around his wagon and his horse around town. However, he'd have a scarf around his face because he died of mouth cancer or something like that, and it just ate his face away. And there was no cure at that time. So Mike Keogh, and the thing is, some of the things I read and said that Mike Keogh had been divorced, his wife died before him, but somehow in the obituary he said he survived by his wife. And the death certificate was signed by his wife. So his wife was also there. She lived to be a little older, but Mike Keogh did die, and he's buried at St. Michael's Cemetery.
Yes.
Did she herself work as a prostitute, or did she just serve as the madam?
In the 1870 census, yeah, the one that I pulled out, I'm making sure that I did do the date right. In the 1870 census, when she's living with Michael 14, who is a farmer, she's listed as a prostitute. So,
she was
yes,
living with him, but
she was living in his home, along with another lady listed as a prostitute and a housekeeper. Housekeeper and the two prostitutes are 18, 22, and 22.
All right.
Going once? Oh, last question.
He asked if there was a age limit for prostitutes.
I will ask you to read this book and come to your own judgment. In the book, just at the end, the main character is asked to go and start working for a family because she now is, I think she was 27 years old. So the madam of the house got her a job working at a house. So,
didn't she have children at all? Birth control
yeah.
was not.
Nell Mandeville had a daughter.
Just one.
Just one daughter. Yep. But you remember, she's now married to Larry Mandeville, and you know she doesn't have to do the duty. She runs the house.
Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you coming out here to the Washington County Hearing Center. We have a lot of great events and programs. I just want to give us our own little thing here, if I can read this. Finally, March 30th, we might actually have the program on Winter's Children, a celebration of Nordic skiing. It has been canceled twice because of snow. And then on April 4th, we have a program about surviving the Holocaust. We have April 13th, seeing Minnesota history through the eyes of Charles Lindbergh. Then April 27th, we have the oldest Twin Cities, a guide to historic treasures. And on May 2nd, yes, May 2nd, for the third time, because he's been wanting to come back, we have George Shire for Minnesota's Golden Age of Wrestling 3.0.
House tour.
What?
House tour.
Well, but also on Sunday, May 21st, we will be hosting the Stillwater Historic Homes Tour. And our co-captains for that are back there. How many houses do we have on the tour right now? We have 8 historic homes of Stillwater that you go through for one price, which is $25. What a great deal. And I think all of you should sign up for that because it is a great history thing around there. So one other thing that we have at the Hay Lake School up in Scandia, that's one of our museums. We have our annual beer tasting on Saturday, June 17th. So be watching for some more of that. And besides that, we have some great books in the bookstore if you want to peruse those. And also remember that little brown box by the door I mentioned before that Tom told me to mention, the donation box, because most of our events here are free. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you again.